Hello, the Divine Code reading for March 24th, pages 581 and 582, and we'll also be finishing up this chapter at the top of page 583. The Prohibition of Theft. The chapter on the Prohibition of Theft, topic number 16. The Prohibition of Theft applies equally to one who steals from an adult or from a minor. There's a rabbinic discussion. Presented in Sheva Mitzvahs Hashem, Volume 2, The Laws of Theft, footnote 46. And this is also footnote 46 in the Divine Code, but it's more of a concise. The Divine Code would often make a more concise in some of the footnotes. But it's referring back to something in the Sheva Mitzvah Hashem book, which is the one up there, that one. And there's a discussion as to whether or not stealing from a minor carries liability to capital punishment. So the law is you cannot steal from other people, and it doesn't matter if the person is a grown-up or a child. It doesn't matter. We're still not allowed to steal from other people. And there's a possibility that the capital punishment aspect of the law of theft may not apply to a minor, but in either case, we're not allowed to, if the victim is a minor, but in either case, we're not allowed to steal from people, including minors. Obviously, a minor who stole is exempt from capital punishment. So, within the Jewish law, crimes or sins that would result in capital punishment are not applied until the person is of, I think it's the age of 20. Generally speaking, that's not always considered the case in the Noahide laws. It would be more if the person is the age of 12 or perhaps 13. But courts can make decisions as to when a person would be, or under what circumstances a person would be liable for capital punishment. That's up to the courts to make those decisions. Within Torah law, just as the issue of the pruta being the minimal amount that would be considered theft, the court, within the Jewish law, these things are spelled out clearly. So it's the pruta, which is the smallest coin within Torah law, is the least amount that a person would be considered it to be theft in a Jewish court. That does not exist in a Noahide court. Rather, the court makes a decision as to what is the amount. And similarly, with regard to whether or not a person is liable at a certain age, in the Jewish law, that would be liable for punishment would be the age of 20 in the area of capital punishment in Jewish law. And the courts would make that decision as to what makes sense in a non-Jewish court, in non-Jewish law. If a minor steals and the stolen money and object is intact, the court is responsible to enforce its removal immediately from the possession of the minor who stole it and to be returned to the owner. If the money or object or stolen object, if the money or object stolen by the minor is no longer intact, the minor is exempt from paying restitution, and his parents are also not obligated to pay for the financial loss. Even after the minor becomes an adult, he is not obligated to pay for the theft if the stolen money has been spent or if the stolen object has been lost or ruined. So that's within the Jewish law. I'm not exactly sure how this would apply in the non-Jewish sense. The Divine Code is saying that in this regard, in this case, the non-Jewish child would not be responsible for paying it back. The parents would not be responsible for paying it back. Now, I suspect it would again be up to the courts to decide the policy in this regard, because otherwise children could take things and the victim is out of luck, so to speak. It's sort of like an oxen that inadvertently breaks something. Would the owner of the ox be responsible? And it's a very complicated discussion. And likewise, with regard to the child, it's a very complicated discussion, and the courts, again, would probably need to make policy in this area. Even after the minor becomes an adult, he's not obligated to pay for the theft if the stolen money has been spent or the stolen object has been lost or ruined. Even though there is no capital punishment for a minor, it is proper for the court to punish minors who steal in accordance to their mental and physical maturity and according to the severity of the theft, in order that they do not become accustomed to stealing or harming people in other ways. That's discussed in the Rambam and the Laws of Theft, Chapter 1, topic number 10. So the court would administrate corporal punishment or some kind of punishment, some kind of supervision to assure that the child does not follow the pathways of theft, because we don't want the child to think it's okay, and when they grow up they think it's okay, and then they would be by the time they get grown up, it's more difficult to train the person properly. It's much better to train the person when they're a child that it's improper to steal. And regarding the maturity in that, obviously a 2-year-old who takes something is not going to understand what they're doing. A 10-year-old might understand. So that, the courts have to, and the parents have to train the child according to where the child is at maturity wise, and what would be appropriate training for the child. Not necessarily punishment, but training. Topic number 17, regarding an enslaved Gentile. And in this area, the laws are very complicated. There's two basic concepts of an enslaved non-Jew. One idea is the what's called an Eved Ger Toshav, and that's a person who takes on the 7 laws, takes on the 7 laws that are applicable to a non-Jew. He's still considered to be a Gentile. And then there's the Eved Ger Toshav that takes on circumcision and immersion in a mikveh, and he has all of the laws that are applicable to a Jewish woman, which is applicable to a Jewish slave. So he basically has a status very similar to a Jewish slave, almost indistinguishable from a Jewish slave. And the laws are very different between these two categories of slave. If the stolen object or money is still in existence, it must be returned to the owner immediately. The same as for a child, which would also be the same for a regular adult. But if it was lost, the master of the slave is exempt from punishment. So in this sense, it's similar to the child, or the way it's explained here for the child, which I think applies to the Jewish child and is being applied to the Gentile child within the divine code. This is because the master is not responsible for the harm perpetrated by the slave, since the slave has his own mind and the master cannot always guard him from stealing. Or the slave might steal in order to damage with the intention of causing, might steal or do other damage with the intention of causing damage or loss to his master. So this is in Rambam, the Laws of Theft, Chapter 1, topic number 9, which immediately precedes topic number 10. Topic number 10 discussed the corporal punishment for a child, training a child properly, and topic 9 is discussing the laws of a slave who steals. My suspicion is that this would be a rabbinic protection over the slave owner. I'm not exactly sure the logic for it, because then does that mean that a slave can just go around causing damage, and the person, the slave owner, is exempt? He doesn't have to control the slave. So I'm not really sure how this works. It's probably much more complicated, but this is the short version of it. Once the slave is freed, he is obligated to pay restitution for his theft and for any other harm he committed. And again, this is in the Rambam Laws of Theft 1:9. In Rambam Laws of Theft 1:9 discusses the slave returning an extra amount. After he's freed, he would be required to return the principal of what was stolen plus an additional amount. The additional amount is a punishment, and it's a punishment specifically in the Jewish law. This does not exist unless the courts decide to do so. This does not exist within non-Jewish law. Therefore, I assume that Rambam Laws of Theft 1:9 is specifically referring to a Eved Kanani, which is when he's free. When an Eved Kanani is freed, he automatically takes on the status of a regular Jew. That does not happen in the case of an Eved. Okay, the Eved Kanani is the Eved Ger Deshaf. It's the same thing, just different words for the same thing. The Eved regular non-Jew who just takes on the 7 laws. No, I'm sorry. That would be the Eved Ger. That would be the Eved Ger Deshaf. The Eved Ger Deshaf and the Eved Kanani are two separate ones. The Eved Kanani is the one that takes on all the Jewish laws that apply to a woman, and when he's freed, he would be considered a full Jew, and therefore he would pay the extra punishment amount of restitution in addition to the principal restitution. The Eved Ger Deshaf is the one who just takes on the 7 laws, and if he was freed, he would still be considered a non-Jew. He would be considered a goy, and would not pay the extra amount. Therefore, because the Rambam, the Laws of Theft, Chapter 1, Topic number 9, speaks of paying extra amount, it can be assumed that's referring to the Eved Kanani, which would not have direct relevance to the laws, and therefore, what's happening is the divine code has taken the basic idea that's explained in Rambam and applying it to the non-Jewish slave. That would be the Eved Ger Deshaf. And it just, whether or not the divine code worked that through properly, I'm not sure, but the principle would still be there. He just would not pay the double. I would assume he's just going to pay the principal of the amount that was stolen. Courts that do not apply capital punishment for theft should still apply some type of strict punishment. Now, this is in this one sentence, it's in a footnote. It can be unpacked, and it'll be unpacked more in the laws of establishment of courts of justice, because it brings up the idea that courts do not necessarily punish with capital punishment in all cases of where the capital punishment exists for breaking the 7 laws. So a court is not required, according to this one sentence in a footnote, is not required to execute everybody. Courts that do not apply capital punishment for theft should still apply some type of strict punishment. All courts should force the convicted thief to pay restitution, as explained in Chapter 2, and that's be starting tomorrow's reading. A slave who committed theft does not own any of his own money, and therefore cannot pay restitution if the money or object he stole is no longer available to be returned. So an alternative punishment should be applied, as was written in Rambam. That would be the Laws of Theft, Chapter 1, topic number 10. So while the slave is a slave, he doesn't own any of his own property. Even if he has money in his pocket that he somehow accumulated money and it's in his pocket, it doesn't belong to him. Therefore, he's not able to pay restitution. Now, again, I'm not really sure if it belongs to the owner, why the owner could not be held liable. It's my guess is it's a rabbinic protection for the owner. A slave who steals is liable to trial in a court in capital punishment for theft, like other Gentiles, like all other Gentiles. And at this point, I assume it's referring to an Eved Ger Toshav, who takes on the 7 rather than an Eved Kanani. There's no footnote on this one, so it's kind of hard to piece it together. But the Eved Kanani is considered a faux non-Jew, a goy. No, I'm sorry. The Eved Ger Toshav is considered a faux non-Jew. An Eved Kanani has entered into the broad auspices of Israel, whereas the Eved Ger Toshav is not. And the Eved Ger Toshav is more one step removed from the status that the Eved Kanani has. So the Eved Ger Toshav would be under the Noahide courts and would still be liable for capital punishment. Again, that depends on the earlier part of the footnote, that that would be in cases where the courts that do apply capital punishment rather than the courts that do not apply capital punishment. Topic number 18. It is forbidden for a Gentile to covet the money of his friend. Minha Kinot Commandment 38, see Shulchan Aruch Harav, Laws of Robbery, end of topic 23. A Gentile is prohibited to rob or extort as a Jew. Extortion is forbidden based on the prohibition of coveting. So according to the Shulchan Aruch Harav, the Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, it's just as the laws apply to a Jew regarding the laws of theft and the laws of extortion, that would also apply to a non-Jew. So the laws are very similar between the two, and that's why we can learn a lot of our the Noahide laws from the Jewish law regarding theft. And extortion is a very active form of coveting. Coveting means to make a plan to acquire something that belongs to someone else, which is borderline theft. It is it's making a plan and starting to do the plan to acquire the desired object, and that would be forbidden for a non-Jew, just as it's forbidden to a Jew. That's coveting. That's making a plan, and that's under the laws of extortion. That would be related to the laws of extortion. The definition of one. See Midrash Seder Eliyahu Rabbah, chapter 24, which says that Shem, a son of Noah, told the people, "You shall not kill, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not kidnap, and you shall not bear false witness, and you shall not covet." So this was before the laws were given at Sinai, but we can see within this that this was included. This was included as a teaching for all of humanity at the time of Shem. The definition of one who covets is one who not only desires another person's belonging or his house, etc., but he also pressures the other person to sell the item to him until the point that the owner does sell it to him, or the owner may be pressured to give it as a gift until he finally does. Even if he gives him a large amount of money for the item, it is still coveted. It is still considered to be one who covets. We said in the Rambam, the laws of robbery, chapter 1, topic 10, and Shulchan Aruch Choshen Mishpat, chapter 3, 59. However, if an object that is designated for sale and the person pressures the seller to reduce his price in the way that all buyers and sellers will haggle back and forth over a price, there's no prohibition involved. So if the person strong arms another person into selling something he wasn't planning to sell, that would be clearly a prohibited action. If the person goes into a store and it's in an area where it's normal to haggle, then doing the normal haggling would not be considered extortion. It would not be considered, in this case, what's being called coveting, because that's what's normal within that society. And the person has already shown the seller has already shown a desire to sell the product. It's up for sale. They're just discussing the price. But if the person comes into a place and he really tries to strong arm the guy outside of the normal business practice for that area, that then would go back to the issue of coveting. Even if one has transgressed the prohibition of coveting, the sale is not canceled. See Megid Mishnah, Laws of Robbery, chapter 1. The one who coveted retains the object, and it is his according to the law, but the final result was that the seller was appeased, and he cannot take it from him by force. Similarly, one who pressures his friend to give him a certain gift has the status of one who covets his friend's money, and this is prohibited. See Rabbeinu Yonah, Shari Teshuva, 343, chapter 3, topic 43. So, okay, first of all, the person who pressures another person into selling the object, it does belong to him, assuming that the laws of the land do not have a 24-hour waiting period or something before these kind of transactions are finalized. There are times when a person is pressured in a situation and then later on he regrets it. That would be up to the courts to decide how that works within their jurisdictional marketplace. But according to Torah law, it would belong to the person right away. Even if the sale was done through pressure, and that'll be discussed more in a future chapter in this area in this unit. And a person should not pressure another person into giving him a gift. We should not pressure people into doing things. We should talk to them, treat them like decent people, and we should desire to live in a peaceful community where we interact in a proper manner and not in a coveting manner. And the way it's described here is coveting is in the area is as extortion, which basically means we pressuring a person to agree to something. In a broader sense, coveting typically means making a plan towards acquiring something. So it may also imply that the person is making a plan and taking steps towards stealing something. Maybe he's casing the bank, or he's making plans to rob a house or something, and he's taking, he's gathering his rope or whatever he needs to break into the house. When people are taking steps towards acquiring something that doesn't belong to them, that's also considered coveting. It's not described as such in the divine code. I'm sure it's described in a. There has to be places where this will be discussed, but it might be under a different topic heading. But that's also typically referred to as coveting. Is making a plan and taking steps towards the plan, but it hasn't actually yet resulted in the theft. But it's steps towards eventually taking something from another person. Topic number 19. It is also forbidden for a Gentile to desire another person's belongings. This refers to anyone who desires his friend's house, field, vessels, or any other item which could possibly be purchased, and mentally plans or desires in his heart to gain that physical item. This is forbidden. So that's based on Rambam Laws of Robbery 110. So some of what's typically referred to as coveting is being described here as desiring. Desiring means allowing the heart to dwell on what belongs to another person. The other person has a donkey. The neighbor has a donkey. And the person thinks, he looks at the donkey every day and he says, gee, I really wish I had that donkey. Not, gee, I wish I had a donkey, which means he could go down to the marketplace and buy a donkey. But he actually wants his neighbor's donkey. That's a strong donkey, and it doesn't kick too much, and it walks where it's supposed to walk. It can be led, and I wish I had that donkey. The person thinks about that every day, and he dwells on it in his heart. That's what's referred to as desiring. And the next step is to think plans through of how to go about gaining the neighbor's donkey. And that's being described here as the making plans is being described here as part of the desire as opposed to the coveting. And the next step would be actually doing things that would help the person to acquire the desired object. So he asks his neighbor to lend him the donkey or even rent him the donkey. I need to use a donkey for a week. Like we gotta take some product to market, and I want to rent the donkey. And so he starts to make plans towards acquiring the donkey. Maybe he walks by the donkey every day and gives him an apple or a sugar, whatever you give donkeys to make them happy. And so he walks by every day. He starts to slowly make plans. He gets the donkey used to walking over to his field. So he's starting to do the steps towards acquiring the donkey. That would be going into the area of coveting, and eventually he'll start pressuring his neighbor to sell him the donkey or to give him the donkey, and that would go more directly into the area of coveting. So the more action related is coveting, and the more thought related is desiring. The reason for these prohibitions is that they are included in the prohibition of theft. For the end result of coveting and desiring is theft. Desiring another man's wife is also forbidden, since it can lead to capital sin of adultery, which is related to theft, as explained in chapter 10. So the area of desiring his neighbor's wife could lead to adultery. It could also lead to causing the neighbor to divorce his wife, or causing, in a Gentile marriage, to cause the wife to divorce her husband, which would be a step towards acquiring the woman as a wife for himself. And that would also be in the area of desiring, coveting, which would be prohibited. We're not to take things that belong to other people, or in the realm of other people's life. We're to have our own lives and behave in a proper manner towards the things we have and towards the things that other people have. We're not to try to upset the balance of what is part of divine providence for ourselves and what's divine providence for another person. The reason for this prohibition of coveting and desiring property of others is given in Sefer HaChinuch, Commandment 4:16, and the Rambam, Laws of Theft, Chapter 1. I'm sorry, Laws of Robbery, Chapter 1:11. Therefore, it is also forbidden to Gentiles to lust after another man's wife, even though he obviously will not be able to acquire her, as this applies to property. So within Gentile marriage, there's no concept of acquiring the wife as property. It's more of a mutual understanding between the two, but still it's in the realm of acquiring a wife, even though she's not property. And therefore that would also be prohibited. Nevertheless, it is possible that he could offer enough money to convince the couple to divorce, and he would then be able to take her as a wife. And this is a transgression of coveting, which is prohibited within the Noahide commandment regarding theft. It is also written in Sefer Mirit Eliyamin, Koshan Mishpat 359:19. The main point is that whenever there is a possibility of theft, there is also the prohibition to covet, and there it does exist a prohibition of theft in regard to adultery, as will be explained in chapter 10 below. So this will be discussed. The first chapter of the prohibition of theft is an overview of the unit on the prohibition of theft, and the various elements that are discussed here will be repeated, will be in more detail. So the area of coveting will be discussed in greater detail in chapter 10. Thank you.